Welcome to another edition of Collector's Quest. And I am by myself, and this is kind of a one-off episode. I'm hesitating to even number it. But the reason we're here today is because it is June 2016, and I have finally finished my Super Nintendo collection. And this is interesting timing because my quest for a Super Nintendo actually began in June about 25 years ago. That's the year 1991. This is fortuitous timing, and I'm going to tell you the true story of my first Super Nintendo and the lengths I went to obtain it. Now I will tell you guys, it's not like a happy story. I've said often that the Super Nintendo is very personal to me. It's kind of why I've hesitated to complete it, that I didn't know what to do if I ever would. I just kind of, I don't know, there was some sort of fear behind completing it. And that's not very rational, and it's just because the Super Nintendo is just really deeply ingrained into my gamer soul. And I didn't know what I would do if I completed that. Like, I always kind of wanted to leave it open. That way, I wouldn't have a reason to kind of stop gaming. This was a idea I had as a child that I said, if I ever make it, I'll buy all the Super Nintendo games. That kind of bullshit defiance that only comes from like a 12-year-old. Well, here we are, 25 years later, and let me get on with it because it's kind of a long story. Here we go. Before I begin, I do want to state that this comes out of my memory from 25 years ago. It is true, but if I misremember something, I don't want to be jumped on for it. I'm 99% sure most of it is accurate, but if I flub a date or something, or I'm not as exact as you would like me to be, that is, again, this is 25 years and I'm trying to recall something from when I was 12 and 13 years old. Here we go. It was the summer of 1991, and the recession and the heat were going strong in Southern California. I mean, it was hot. It was hot as balls. It was just non-stop sweat. It was awful. I'm 12, and my family is really poor, and I'm not talking poor like, oh, we can't buy things and, we got a small house. We share a one-bedroom, or let me state that clearly. We share a bedroom. And this is not a one-bedroom house or an apartment. It is one singular room, which, in fact, is a small half-basement room under my aunt's house. It is so small that we have to sleep on bunk beds. This is my parents below and me on top. My parents do not get along with my aunt, and they barely get along with each other. But this means my aunt who is upstairs does not let us go upstairs to use the bathroom, to have dinner, to use the kitchen. There's none of this. Next door to us lives my grandmother, and this house is no great refuge either. However, she does let us use the bathroom and the kitchen, and she does let us have the room that we're staying in. My aunt does not own the house that she is in. This is house 2 of my grandmother's house, and they are not rich or anything. This is just a small shack that they've built onto their property when my grandparents bought this property in California back in the 50s, okay? So that's where this is coming from. There's one thing you should know, too. How did we get in there, to this room? Well, because my grandma at one point becomes concerned because we've been living in a Motel 6, and actually, I consider living in this basement room a large step down, at least at the Motel 6. I wasn't surrounded by people who actively disliked me. My aunt dislikes my parents, and then dislikes me. My grandmother hates my father because she blames him for the mess of my mother's life, and my parents are just not great people. So it's not unreasonable that she doesn't like him. What's unreasonable is she transfers some of that dislike onto me. By some, I mean pretty much all of it. My grandmother and I have a contentious relationship by the time I'm 5 years old, and that is not any kind of exaggeration. My grandmother is not a shy or a woman who holds back at all. She was a woman who would let you know if she didn't like you. She would also say blood is thicker than water, but that did not mean she did not despise me or, other members of our family. She just, despite that, would take you in. That's the story there. So aside from my grandmother's house being good for, being able to go eat and go to the bathroom, it also has the advantage of being a stable residence, which means the Nintendo Power subscription I got always has a place to go. And that house is still there, still populated by my family. And if I still had a magazine subscription, I'm sure it would still be going strong. So that's another thing. The Nintendo Power here is important. Why? Because this is where I first hear about the Super Nintendo. I get it, and it's, in June, and I read that it's going to be released in North America sometime in the late summer or early fall. And man, I just had to have it. I had a NES. I don't even know how that happened, but I was fortunate enough to at least get that and had some games and was a kid who constantly traded. But I was running out of games to play. I was ready for the next thing, and the Super Nintendo just seemed amazing. I'd been hearing about the Genesis, but I didn't care. I was a Nintendo kid. I wanted the next Nintendo. So I'm super pumped. Then kind of reality hits me. It's just my parents are never going to be able to buy me one. Getting the NES was my parents writing a bad check to get it. But neither of them have worked in like a year. And they both lost their jobs. The recreational drug use became heavy drug use or hardcore drug use. And my grandma, who despises me, definitely isn't buying me a Super Nintendo. I would have had a better shot wringing blood from a stone. So this situation is pretty bleak. And I can do one of two things. I can cry about it or I can do something about it. And I tend to be solution oriented. So I said, all right, I got a plan. I'm going to look in the penny saver and I'm going to see if there's anyone looking for small handiwork, lawn mowing, washing cars, any kind of shitty work that a kid could do, even in this heat. I would do it. I walked up and down the streets too, across neighborhoods, knocked on doors. That's how determined I was to get this Super Nintendo. I do stumble across one ad though in the penny saver. Had some success with like knocking on doors, but eventually it's like mid-June and I get this ad and it is looking for kids 13 and up who want to make some money. I decide to call. I wait for the house to be empty. I find my opportunity and I call. And look, they're looking for someone 13. I'm 12. I, at that age, already understand that 13-year-olds working is pretty shady and kind of young. So I'm guessing if they're looking for 13-year-olds, they probably aren't doing a good job of checking ages. So I'm just going to lie. I'm going to also be 13 in October, so it's not that big a deal. I call. The company is called Junior Careers. That place is super shady. Let me tell you, whatever I describe here, it's 10 times shadier than my description. And let me boil it down for you. Junior Careers makes its money by using kids to sell candy door to door. They rely on desperate kids to look desperate. The more helpless you look, the better you are. And the better you are, the better it is for them. So here's what happens. You get dropped off on a random street corner. Most of the time it's not in the city you even live in. And you walk up and down, stopping at every house on the way, trying to sucker some people into buying candy from you. They need to look at you and see your desperation and, buy in. Maybe you're a great salesman at 12 or 13. Probably not. Here's the other, the worst part about them. You don't have a salary. You don't have an hourly rate. What you have is commission. This is commission-based sales. You are making 80 cents to $1 depending on the price of the item you sell. $4 box candy, 80 cents. $5 or $6 item, which I think is like a candle and like 2 different boxes of candy, that was $1. That was like, it felt good when you sold a candle because you knew it was a full dollar. Each time you sold it, it felt great, but if you didn't sell anything that night, it felt really bad. Mostly you sold a few things. Anyways, get dropped off on this corner, and when you'd walk up and down, you'd finish your block, you would then go to a wait point, which is usually like, here's this street, and here's the 2 streets next to it. You go do those. Guy in the van says, I'll be back in a half hour. So I do want you to remember that this is 1991. There aren't really cell phones, especially not in kids' hands. Pagers aren't really a thing. And even if they were, the kids who are working at Junior Careers don't have pagers. That's just not part of the identity of poor kids, not at least in my town. So you are stranded. You're on an island all by yourself, and it's at night. Like, you start to work in the day, and thankfully it was the summer, so it stayed day pretty late, but you wouldn't stop till late in the evening sometimes. There is definitely a point in time where it is dark out and you're just out there. You're stranded, you're waiting, and you're just hoping they come back and pick you up. This is Junior Careers. White van, no windows, packed with kids not in seatbelts, with boxes of candies surrounding them, walking up and down streets in dark cities they don't live in with no ability to call for help, and making 80 cents a box of candy. No hourly wage at all. Junior Careers. Great job. Great first job. That's them, but let me break down how the call goes. So like I said, the house is empty. I make the call, and when I called, I obviously didn't know that Junior Careers was such a shady operation, but honestly, it wouldn't have mattered. I was so fixated, and I get a little obsessive about getting this Super Nintendo. It really didn't matter what the job was. As long as I wasn't hurting anyone, I was probably going to do it, or being hurt myself. I call, a guy named Ron picks up. He doesn't really ask me anything. Within 2 minutes, he tells me, I'm hired. He wants to know my address, that I start tomorrow, that he would be there at 3. He doesn't ask my age. He doesn't ask my story. I don't know if he asked my name. Maybe I volunteered it. I don't think it mattered to him. Anyways, 3 p.m. the next day comes. And here's what shows up in this white van with no windows. He's burly, overweight, unshaved. He's got a dirty shirt. He's got pit stains. And in this van, he just honks twice. He doesn't come to the door. He doesn't want to meet my parents. He doesn't want to say anything to him. This dude got zero fucks to give about anything that's going on. I can't imagine what he's making, but whatever. This is his job. This is what he's doing. Boom. I get out the door when I hear the honks. I have not explained this to my parents. Kind of told them that I got a job. And I haven't explained what the job is. But when I tell them, man, boy, do they laugh. Who doesn't love to be laughed at by their parents? This is like kind of beyond. This is the funniest shit they have ever heard. My dad says, who the fuck hires a 12-year-old? And that is a piece of wisdom. Because really, who does? I told him right off the bat, Junior Careers. Of course, I recited the ad I had read, which stated it was an organization to help kids stay off the street and make money for school. That's what the ad said. That's the ad I found. There is some irony built into their mission statement. Keeps kids off the street to make money for school, and they achieve this by putting kids on the street. At the time, I did not pick up on that irony. And my parents, they didn't really care. They didn't pick up the irony either. Whatever. I'm out of their hair. Great for them. Boom. I'm in the van, and it's my first day at Junior Careers. And it goes just as I described. Walking up and down streets, peddling candy, hoping nothing goes wrong. I stay with Junior Careers until early August, and I only stopped because I was going up to Northern California for an annual visit to my cousin's house. I made some money, but not a lot. Part of the fact that the job wasn't really designed for me to make money, and some of it was my inexperience, and another part was the setup here lacks efficacy on all fronts. So the job starts around 3. I mean, you're picked up at 3, but it doesn't start till 5. Because you get picked up, and then you got to go pick up all the other kids, and that takes time. And then driving to whichever city you're going to go to, that takes time. So you would work from 5 to 8 or 9 in the evening. You're out in the dark, standing on corners. You got no flashlight, no phone, and not much in the way of safety. Nothing ever happens to me aside from a scuffle and 2 theft, which also come out of my earnings. So if you get stolen from, of course, blame the kid and take their money. That's cool. And if you're doing the math, If you get one box stolen, how many boxes do you got to pay for? Anyways, I was lucky, to be honest. I went to some bad areas of downtown LA, into neighborhoods that I had zero business being in during the day or at night, especially at my age. But again, overall, pretty lucky. I had heard horror stories about kids who were abducted, raped, they were beat up, and every other unseemly manner of horror that falls in between the spectrum of robbery and kidnapping and rape. So whatever your imagination figures out in between those, I heard a little bit about it, or, it was known to be something that could happen to you. That was not a great time. And, when I reflected on it later, I feel really bad for those kids when you hear this stuff. And didn't deter me, though. I was only focused on one thing at that time. I work a total of 6 weeks, and I was doing it, 4, sometimes 5 nights a week. And by the time it's all over, I have $700. I have enough time to buy a Super Nintendo. And I loved watching my money grow. The more money I made, the more times I came home and put money in my little jar, the more excited I got, the more I wanted to work. I had a super sweet plan. I was going to buy a Diamondback mountain bike. I was going to buy a Super Nintendo. And I'd probably have enough 2 games after that, maybe even 3. I am feeling top of the world. I never felt so lucky. I'm going up to my cousins, my aunt and my uncle and my cousin. My cousin, he's my age. And my aunt and uncle are like stable people. They're just normal adults with jobs and a house. And it's always a nice break to go into a stable home. Forward to it every year. And I've made so much money that I decided I'm taking $50 with me. Me and my cousin, we're going to go ahead and we're going to rent movies. We're going to buy candy. We're going to rent games too. And it's going to be 3 weeks of bliss. There's going to be more candy and soda games than we know what to do with. It was the best kind of summer trip. All those things happen. When you were 12, renting R-rated movies and eating candy, there's just like nothing finer. And both my aunt and uncle work, so we're pretty much unsupervised. We just got the house to ourselves. It is amazing. And I'm also not in a one-room dungeon. I'm at a house, even though I'm back on a bunk bed, which is fine with me. But I got space to spread out. There's a yard. There's a comic book down the street. I have a great time. And the same feeling that I get every time I come home. And it's just regret and sadly jealousy of my cousin and his very stable life, just wishing I could have stayed at his house forever or be him, just be anybody but me and have anybody but my parents. But 3 weeks ends and my parents said that's enough and they wanted me back for, which I assumed are more property-based rather than those born out of parental instincts or caring. And so you're probably wondering, okay, I take $50, I have $700. Where does a kid put $650? Well, I had taken great care to hide my money before I left. I got a hole in the side of my mattress. And let me break down how the bunk bed is. Okay, so there's a wall. Bunk bed is pushed up into the corner of the wall, so we're on 2 walls. And my mattress, one side faces both walls. I take the long side of the mattress, I cut a small hole in it, and I take my money and I put it in there, half of it. I then cut a hole down the other side. I stuff some money down there too. So it's not just all of it right there. I figure maybe they find it. If they do, they can't get all of it. They're looking. Hopefully just no one takes it. My money is well hidden, stuffed in little bags. I got it down as far as my little arms could go. And I did this in secrecy. My parents pretty much passed out because they were never out of that room. But when you get high and the heroin nod off, you feel like, you might be safe. Think I'm safe. They are, passed out, totally on the nod, reruns on the TV, cigarettes smoldering in full ashtrays. I had hidden it. I felt safe. I felt good about the hiding. Felt like no way they could possibly find this money. It feels bad a little bit to hide the money like that. And a normal kid would entrust this hoard to his parents. But a normal kid doesn't, and I hesitate to use the word normal. Who knows? My perceived idea of normal. I didn't trust them. That's the bottom line. They were desperate. They were unemployed. They were junkies. Just, what do you do? When I left, I was actually the only person in the room with a job, and I'm 12. No, these are grown adults. So it's a very tenuous situation. And when I get home, every quiet fear I had was realized the moment I walked into our room. I went right up to my bed, and my father just sneers at me. "What are you hoping to find up there, John boy?" He's mocking me, so that's cool. Knew what I was hoping to find up there. He thought I was hoping to find the money, and that's true to a point. I was hoping to find the money. But it's more than that. I'm looking to find that my summer dream, the dream of the Super Nintendo I've been working for, that child's trust in their parents for safety, to know I worried for no reason, for reassurance. I'm looking to find that I've got parents that wouldn't steal from their kid and that valued them and wouldn't put me in this situation. What I found was, in fact, every fear I had made real, anger and anguish. And I don't actually have a place to put any of those things. I'm trapped in a small room with a dad who is either high out of his mind or just resentful and angry. And he looks at me and he tells me the following: that I am his son, that any money I made was his money. The fact that I tried to hide the money and never gave it to him was wrong, that I am ungrateful, and that I am an asshole who should be ashamed of myself. I also think that I was told to quit my fucking sniveling and get outside. I can't confirm the last part because some point in my dad's speech to me, I am full blown enraged, and I'm starting to go blind to the blood pulsing in my head and eyes, and just rage covering everything that I could feel. I can hear blood pounding like in my ears, and that's it. And I want to scream, and that's all I want to do. And I think I'm screaming in my head, and that's like the memory I have of that moment, which is not the best. I feel pretty bad. I take myself and I just get out. I just leave. Get outside. I pace around the property for a few hours, and I'm trying to get a grip on myself. I am trying not to cry. I'm trying not to tell myself how stupid I am. I'm telling myself that when the tears do come, not to feel bad about that. I'm just trying to get myself in control. It's hard work. School is going to start in 2 weeks, and I am just kind of stuck, and I know it, and I'm just thinking about it. I know I need to do something. The Super Nintendo is still out there. There's still opportunities. I need to keep my head, and I need to make a new plan. While the dream of buying a bike and playing the Super Nintendo is dead, I have to acknowledge it, and I just need to move on. Night fully settles into itself, and I'm still pacing, and my grandmother finds me, and she tells me to get inside and stop stalking around the property. I do what any reasonable child does. I leave. Again, I'm too angry to go back in that room and face them. So I hike up to a hill, like on this big, like kind of sandstone cliff that overlooks the railroad tracks and all the city of Simi Valley. It's a pretty good place to sit, honestly. You can see all the stars, you can see the lights of the city. The only noise you hear are bugs and the trains. It's pretty peaceful. It's a place that I would go to a lot. It is a place meant to kind of search your soul and your feelings and figure out. I didn't know it that time, but in the summer of 1992, the following summer, this would also become my home for 6 weeks. So I stayed out there all night till morning, wishing on stars and hating every bit of my parents. And that's the end of part 1. Come back next week when this concludes in part 2. And right now you can actually see the whole Super Nintendo collection on YouTube. Just search my name, Johnny Iucci. That's JohnNyiucci. Also, be sure to follow at Catsylvania. She's my partner and just not here for this episode. Anyways, we'll talk to you next week, and thank you so much for listening. Welcome to episode 37 of Collector's Quest. and this is part 2 of how I got my first Super Nintendo. And before we get into that, I want to just remind everybody to go visit our Collector's Quest podcast page. That's collectors_quest_podcast. We have content there that Kat and I don't put on our personal pages. Another thing is, if you like what we're doing here, please just go to iTunes and give us a rating. That really helps get the show going, gets us to more people, and helps us keep doing it. Without further ado, here's the conclusion. That morning, I had an early breakfast with my grandmother, and then called Ron to see if I could work the remainder of the summer. As it was 7 a.m., and Ron, who was clearly a drunk, was not awake. I did resort to leaving him a message on his answering machine that told him I was ready to come back to work and would be ready at 3. I managed to mostly avoid my parents, only speaking to them enough to convey I was going to be gone all evening. I didn't tell them I was going back to work, but I'm sure they guessed. It was pretty obvious. As luck would have it, Ron would arrive promptly at 3. Now, there was no callback, so I just kind of waited around and crossed my fingers and got lucky. My return to junior careers was confirmed. I worked until school started, and then I was done. I was more than happy to walk away from that job forever. Turns out forever would be 9 months. While I didn't make enough to buy a Super Nintendo in that 2 weeks, I was actually really close. My birthday wasn't far away either. It was just about a month until October, and my birthday is on the 11th, so, not long. I would finally be a teenager, the big 13. With this big birthday, I was hoping that I might get enough cash to finally buy the Super Nintendo. Having one bought for me was still out of the question, but hoping for enough cards stuffed with like $13 in them wasn't out of the question, and if I got enough of those, I would be able to swing it. After a disastrous end to August, the end of September was actually looking pretty good. My dad got a job, no one more shocked than me, I assure you, and it looked like we were going to get an apartment of our own. I told my parents if we could only afford one room, I would be fine sleeping within the living room. That would be good enough. That would seem like a villa compared to what we had just endured for the past 14 months. A one-room apartment would be more than enough for me. Somehow, we got a 2-bedroom apartment. It was at the Meadowood Apartments. My parents were on some sort of combination of HUD and my father's salary, and we were able to swing it. I don't know the details. I was positively dancing, though. My soul hadn't felt this light in quite some time. I hadn't had my own room in years. I didn't know what to do with myself. With my birthday now less than a week away, my mother approached me to discuss what I wanted for my birthday. I wish I could tell you that I was a good enough kid or unselfish enough to not want anything and to understand the delicate situation my family was in, being poor and having just got this apartment. But I wasn't. I was 12 going on 13, and I had just had my money taken from me, and I'd worked very hard to try and buy a Super Nintendo. All I wanted at that moment in my life was a Super Nintendo. That was it. OCD focus, 100% Super Nintendo. And I told my mother this with all the enthusiasm of a 12-year-old. How hard I'd worked. I told her that. I told her that it was just that last 2 weeks. I'd gone to work the whole time. I'd been saving. How I'd saved my money again. I told her I nearly had enough. And that all I wanted, not for them to buy the Super Nintendo, was just a little bit of money to put towards it. My secret hope, and the one that I let slide into my mind in the quiet moments before sleep, was that I would actually get enough money to buy an additional game. Like, that was it. That was my big wish. A Super Nintendo and one extra game. That's it. All a 13-year-old wanted for his birthday. My mother explained to me that she felt pretty bad about what had happened before, but she did tell me the money my father took helped them get the apartment. That made me feel a little bit better about it, but it was still pretty awful, and I was still pretty sore over the whole event. And my father and I had not repaired that rift. We still were barely speaking. She asked me if I understood, and I said yes. I mean, what else could I say? My mother then offered the olive branch. She told me she would take my money and that for my birthday, she would pay the difference between what I had and what it cost to buy the Super Nintendo with Super Mario World. And I guess in my mind, I mean, look, it sounds sappy and stupid, but I was like, everything is forgiven. I was pretty overjoyed. I pulled out my stash, which was the sum total of $186, and I passed it to my mother. The 4-day wait until my birthday was maddening. I counted every minute twice. Finally it came, and it had the double pleasure of being a Friday. It was the Friday that my school also observed Columbus Day. It was a 3-day weekend. The Holy Trinity. I was good to go. Everything was in place. It seemed like I had all the time in the world for a newly christened 13-year-old to play a Super Nintendo. All I had to do was just wait and be patient for just a bit. My mother told me we had to wait for my dad to get home before we could do anything, so I waited. And then I waited some more. The clock sluggishly moved minute to minute, but eventually time moved enough to allow my dad to come home. And he got in from work, and I was told we were going to have dinner, and that after dinner there was to be a small cake, and we were going to my grandmother's the following afternoon for a more proper family party. This was just to be the three of us. I guess the impatience was plain on my face, and it couldn't be stifled. My dad was kind of staring at me, so I just blurted it out that I wanted to open my gift before dinner. I was tired of waiting, and I had earned it. This is probably not my best moment. I was pretty overcome. I was frustrated. I was tired of waiting. I'd waited a whole Friday. My dad didn't have it off, so this one day, which is supposed to be a day off, celebrating Columbus Day, I just couldn't do anything. I didn't really have friends either, so it wasn't like go out and hang out with some friends. It was sit in my room and wait. Just wait. So, with me just telling my father I had earned it, he rounded on me quick as a snake. He had his face an inch from mine. He took his index finger and just started thumping it into my chest, and he was yelling and spitting each word as only my father can do. He says, "Did I think that he was going to let some ingrate 12-year-old tell him when or how we were going to do anything?" I piped up because I'm a smartass and didn't know how to bite my tongue and said, "I'm 13. And this retort from my father is perfect and without hesitation. Who the fuck cares? Sadly, the answer to that question was no one. I was told to get in my room and stay there, and then if he heard me crying, he would come in there and give me something to cry about. So I went into my room, and happy birthday to me. No dinner, no cake, no Super Nintendo. What I had not realized at the time was that I had been duped. My parents never planned on getting me a Super Nintendo. They took my money and flushed it down a needle. It was just another tool helping them get their next fix. I do not regret giving the money to my mother. You might read that and think, God, this kid's an idiot, and didn't he see this coming? But without the ability to trust in others, you're never going to make it through this life. It's just too hard. I have regret over what happened, but it's based on my mother's actions, not mine. Every son should want to trust their mother, their father. In a perfect world, you'd be able to. The next day at my grandmother's just added to what was absolutely the worst birthday I ever had. I got a few cards from family members, and I did get a little bit of money. My loving grandmother bought me a box of cereal. Yes, that's correct. Cereal for my birthday. And I do like cereal, but this isn't like some inside joke where, "Oh, hey, grandson, you love cereal so much, I bought you this fun box of cereal, and here's something else," or "Here's a few boxes of cereal, and I'm poor, so this is what you get." No, It was just like a casual fuck you on my birthday. And my aunt gave me an even better gift, a used Dodger hat that I was obligated to put on my head, regardless of the fact that I was, one, not a Dodgers fan, and two, didn't really care about baseball. My older sister was a no-show, and who could really blame her for missing this awesome party? The cake was white and coconut frosted, which is fine if you like that, but I don't like white cake, nor do I like coconut frosting. In fact, it's kind of universally known that I dislike those things. Time marched on. It was steadfast in its slow-moving slouch, and I endured the party. I wasn't really present. I heard people telling me I should be in a better mood, and that you're a teenager now, act your age, and some bullshit commentary about how ungrateful I was. I have never been an ungrateful person, and hearing it for the second time in less than 24 hours, I just snapped. I remember standing up and confronting everyone. What should I be grateful for? Is it for this cake that I hate? This hat that I hate? Maybe I should be grateful for this family. And I stopped myself just before adding that I hate, but I'm sure that everyone pretty much understood it was there. I throw the hat on the ground, I march to the car, I get in the back seat, and I did not speak another word for nearly 2 days. And mind you, this is my birthday, and what a wonderful 3-day weekend it's been so far. The long weekend passed, and finally I was able to escape my bedroom and go to school. Monday morning came, and I crept out of the house without an incident. I made my way to the city bus stop and waited for my carriage to arrive. I would say school is probably the last place I wanted to go, but now, in actuality, it's ranked as like third least appealing place to go, just beating out my grandmother's and my parents' apartment. My reason for disliking school, nothing out of the ordinary. It was 8th grade and I was in junior high, and being in 8th grade or being in junior high is enough. The school day was pretty uneventful, but like all school days for me, I couldn't wait for it to end. I made sure to catch the late bus home, though. I wasn't grounded. I was just angry. Anywhere in the apartment that wasn't my room meant I could possibly see my parents, and I couldn't look at them. The very sight of them made me ball my fists, clench my jaw, and grind my teeth. I hated everything about them, and try as I might, I could not shake that feeling. Something between us was broken, and it was not repairable. Walking the long parking lot to the back of the complex, I got a pleasant surprise when I found my Aunt Carol parked and waiting for me. Normally a visit from Aunt Carol was carefully arranged beforehand by her to minimize any chance of her running into my father. My Aunt Carol is my father's sister, and at this time she is my favorite aunt and my dad's least favorite sister. She was the cool aunt. She was the one who took me to movies, gave me too much candy, bought me comics, and she made sure every birthday that I got at least a $20 bill, and every Christmas I got a Nintendo game. She was the best. Her arrival, this is like the best thing to happen to me in days. And if you can recall, one of those days was my birthday, my 13th birthday. It should have been awesome. When I approach the car, she rolls down the window and looks at me and says, "Get in." No greeting, just get in. Her tone has me worried. I figure she must be angry with me, even though I didn't feel like I'd done anything wrong. I'd been kind of mouthy and stomped around a bit on my birthday, but I didn't feel like it was that bad. Hindsight, it was pretty bad, but not unjustified. I think this feeling of worry is probably the exclusive domain of all children who are spoken to in raised, firm tones by an adult. My immediate assumption was that she had talked to my parents and that they had somehow lied to her and twisted the story to cast even more blame on me. With some hesitation, I slid into the passenger seat of my aunt's car, narrowly avoiding, and I remember this clearly, that stupid auto seatbelt. She always had this car with this seatbelt that just kind of choked you or hit you in the face. Anyways, as great as being right is, this is a moment I would have loved to have been wrong. My aunt is a no bullshit kind of lady, and she'll tell you what's on her mind, and she won't really soften the blow. She's not there to make you feel better. Knowing this, I was not surprised when she asked, "Why were you too big of a crybaby to talk to me on your birthday?" The look of contempt I gave her pulled the wind from her sails a little bit because she stops a little short. I think she expected to see shame on my face, to find a boy too old to cry caught in the act. When she didn't see that, she started again, and with a noticeably different tact. What happened on your birthday? I start from the beginning, telling her all about junior careers, the Super Nintendo, the theft of my money by my parents not once, but twice, and what an idiot I feel like for letting that happen. During the telling, I did start to feel shame. And I did cry. Probably a few times. The tears then magnify my feeling of shame and stupidity. I know my aunt is not into crying, so I tried to keep it together, but I couldn't. I was at my breaking point. My father would often tell me my aunt was the high queen ice bitch of all the lands. And he wasn't exactly wrong. Her patience for my blubbering and inability to get my story out was at an end. She shushed me and asked me one question. What do you want me to do about it, Johnny? And I had an answer ready. I told her I wanted to leave, that I would rather be anywhere else. And I swore to her if she took me, I would be good. I wouldn't ask for anything. I would do anything, and in that moment, I would have sworn an oath. I would have told any lie. I would have broken every promise I had ever made to be taken away from there. It was not to be. I mistook her statement as a question. She said she couldn't take me, and it wouldn't be right, that I was just going to have to get through it like everybody else did. My conversation with my aunt degrades from there into incoherent sobs and self-pity that I felt in that moment. It still stings a little today, but what are you going to do? That's how life goes. I was coming unglued. I could feel whatever that inner steel I had go thin and papery. I was no longer strong enough to hold myself together. That strength, it was gone. The next month would be one of the darkest times in my life. My self-esteem would dip to lows that I didn't know I had. I didn't recognize myself physically or mentally. The strong, sturdy material I thought made me who I was had eroded. I'd become a shapeless, purposeless thing. In this wretched time of my life, I gave real consideration to suicide. It's the one and only time I've ever considered it. I'm a strong proponent against it, but I had already gotten to that point. I mean, some background here. I was raised Catholic. Suicide wasn't really an option, but I'd gotten there somehow. Anything seemed better. I wish I could tell you that what kept me away from it was the last remnants of my inner steel coming strong again, the fire of my forge lighting. But in reality, it was fear. It was fear based on all those Catholic teachings. Fear of the pain. Fear of doing it wrong and surviving. Whatever happened, I didn't want to fail and be institutionalized, or live a life physically maimed. I am thankful that I never had access to a gun during this point of my life. The ease at which I could have made a fatal error is staggering. And if you're curious what stopped me from circling the drain, it was my older sister. She is unlikely a savior, as you can imagine. Her name is Megan, and at the time she is 21 years old, married, has a 9-month-old daughter. She shares a house with not just her husband and daughter, but with 3 and sometimes 4 roommates. They've got the garage converted. People are sleeping in every single room. They're just struggling to make it. She works off and on, and her husband's in construction. You might have heard it was the recession. It's not a great field to be in. My sister fled our house when she was 16 years old. She went out the window of her bedroom one night and never returned. We knew she was okay, and she kind of kept in touch, but my parents never tried to bring her home. I never blamed my sister for leaving, and in all my life, I never asked her why. And I probably never will, and I guess I never really have to. I kind of know. It's now early November, about a month after my birthday. My sister comes to the door, and I'm relieved. It's not to see her specifically, but to see anyone. My parents hadn't been home in what was about 2 days. It's not unheard of for them to be gone that long, but it is a bit worrisome. Turns out my parents had found their way to jail. A couch fell off a truck that they were driving behind, and they hit it pretty good. The impact caused them to spin off the freeway, crash into the side of a mountain. They had minor injuries. My mother broke her arm, but both of them would be fine. What wasn't fine was that my parents were both loaded on a multitude of drugs when the police arrived at the scene. After they were treated, they were taken directly to jail. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. In that 2-day span, no one came for me. Not the police, not CPS, not a soul. I went to school both days, and nobody even blinked at me. Life went on. No one was concerned. My parents used their one call to try and persuade my grandmother to post bail. That was a big no-go, so they were going to have to see the judge and hope for the best. It did not go well, but it definitely could have been worse. They both spend the next 3 months in jail. Somehow in all of this, I am never mentioned. No one ever asked where I was or what I was doing. My grandmother obviously knew I had to be somewhere, but she never came for me. She never even called anyone. If my sister hadn't stopped by my grandmother's the day that they had gone to jail to give her a quick visit with her baby, who knows if she would have told anyone. I would like to tell you she definitely would have called or something, but that's very unlikely. My sister took me from the Meadowood apartments and I would never return there. I would only live with my sister for about 8 months, but they were absolutely paramount in my healing and rediscovery of self-worth. My sister and I never get along when we live together. The age gap between us was just too big. This second go-round was no exception. We fought a lot, but I needed that. I needed someone to lead me into a fight, to kind of rekindle that fire that had been lying dormant inside me. I don't know if she did this on purpose or if it's happenstance, but I'll always be grateful. I did wind up getting a Super Nintendo that year. My Aunt Carol, who I hadn't yet forgiven for stranding me with my parents, sent a card for Christmas. She lived on the other side of town, so she clearly wasn't ready to see me or call me, be it from guilt, shame, or disgust, I don't know. The card arrived a week early, and it had 3 crisp $100 bills inside. Not willing to make the same mistake for a third time, I immediately got on my brother-in-law's bike and pedaled down to the local game store. It's called the Game Exchange. It still exists. I walked straight to the counter and I asked for a Super Nintendo. The shopkeeper there is a pudgy guy named Al, and he told me I was lucky. They had just gotten some in. I don't know if that was just salesmanship or what, but I was thrilled. I left the shop with a brand new Super Nintendo and a copy of Final Fantasy II, which I couldn't be happier to get. The bulk made it impossible for me to ride home. I don't know if you remember the long box Super Nintendo, but it was gigantic. I was content to walk the couple of miles with the bike in hand. At the time, I thought this was my finest hour, and that the pendulum of my life had finally swung in the other direction and was going in my favor. But it's true, it was a pendulum. And as all pendulums do, they swing back the other way. By June of 1992, my sister could no longer afford to keep me. We were evicted from the house we were living in, and in an unlikely turn of events, my grandmother agreed to let me sleep on the couch at her house. The peace between us would only last a few weeks. I was cast out of the house and told I was dead to the family. And that's a story for another day, but it's basically me being disrespectful and her being rude and mean and cruel and me not liking it. I lived on that rock above the train tracks for about 6 weeks. In that span, I had managed to get back in touch with Junior Careers and resume my life as a candy con man. And in that 6 weeks of homelessness, I did have brief interludes as a normal boy. I had made one friend, and he lived close by, and he would let me stay at his house while his mom and dad were at work. We played my Super Nintendo endlessly, and if nothing else, it gave me a place to shower and stay out of the heat. From this point of my life, it would get better. It's not in a single leap or a bound, but in a steady upward thrust of switchbacks. It did, of course, have lows. There's still plenty of bad things that I had to traverse, but that's the nature of life. It's never going to be perfect. A quick note about that Super Nintendo. It is one of the few things from my past I still own. I have it and the Final Fantasy II I bought that day. I don't know how I managed to keep it when I've lost nearly everything else, but I still have it and it's still very special to me. My life had peaks and valleys, but never went nearly as low as the fall of 1991. And I know that this tale seems sad, but I can tell you now then that I'm 25 years removed from this situation. I have no regrets. My life is now better than I could have ever imagined. I served in the military. I graduated college. I completed a Super Nintendo collection. I enjoy unbelievably good friends, and I have a wife I clearly don't deserve. The indignities of my childhood seem like a very pitifully small price to pay to have what I do today. And if I had not gone through all of that, I never would have made it here. So that's my story. And I know it's a bit heavy, and it's not meant to seem like a competition either. And I've had some people reach out to me already and tell me gosh, they feel bad, and now what they went through wasn't that bad. And that's not what this is about at all. It's not me competing against you. People in life have experiences that are centered around themselves, and if it was bad for you at the time, it was bad. It's not bad by comparison. It's not like we put, here's what happened to Johnny, and here's what happened to you. Nope, doesn't quite rate. That's not what this is. Please don't feel like you can't share with me your experiences because you don't feel like it was that bad in comparison. It was bad for you, and that's what the gaming community has allowed me to do. It's allowed me to share this story. Collecting is very personal. People with a lot of nostalgia, people who reflect on their past, and I would love to hear from anyone. And if you went through anything similar, God, I'm sorry. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. Stay tuned next week. Kat will be back with us, and we have some more exciting episodes for you. Please remember, use the hashtag CQPicks. That way we can do our pick of the week. And I've been meaning to call this out for 3 weeks, and I've totally forgot, but Lord Sega has won our pick of the week, probably for 3 weeks. We want to see some healthy competition, though. His pictures were pretty good, and I'll make sure to post those. And you can find me at Johnny_Iucci. That's JOHNNY_IUCCI at Instagram. Please follow Kat Sylvania. You know who she is. Follow her on Instagram. And I'm going to try and condense this episode and the last episode into one and throw that up on YouTube. Thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing. And thank you for giving me your time. I'll talk to you next week.